Only one time she made an exception. There was a woman she knew that had been married for 8 years. And this woman, she brought her home and she said, come at 9 o'clock. I want you to stand by the window and come look. And sure enough, the Rebbitzin's car pulled up and the Rebbitzin looked up and her eyes locked with this woman for a long moment. 9 months later, this woman was blessed with a healthy, beautiful baby girl. And Rabbi Paltia was sharing the story in Pardes Chana. It's a group of girls. And one of the young ladies jumped up and said, that's me. That girl is me. And I was sharing with my students, you see the Rebbitzin, what a level, right? Without any words being exchanged. Like Moshe Rabbeinu, who wanted to look at Eretz Yisrael in order to emit the bracha through his holy eyes. Here, a woman who didn't have children for 8 years, she sees the Rebbitzin, their eyes locked, and she's blessed with the most beautiful bracha. It reminds me of the very famous story of the Nshei Chabad sending a beautiful bouquet of flowers to the Rebbitzin, for the Rebbitzin and the Rebbe's 50th anniversary. And attached, of course, was a card with names of women that need to be benched with children. And the Chesed Halberstam gave the flowers to the Rebbitzin and then took the card with the names and handed it to the Rebbe. And the Rebbe said, it's written for the Rebbitzin. He said, yes, but these are people that need brachas from the Rebbe. And the Rebbe famously answered, the Rebbitzin can also give brachas. And what's perhaps less known is something that I heard, which is the Rebbe explained that the Rebbitzins brachas come from an even higher level, from the level of Soivet Kol Almin. While a regular bracha can come from the Mali, Soivet means it's so lofty that it doesn't even take into consideration the worthiness of the recipient. You don't even need to be a keli for this bracha. From the Rebbitzin, her holy eyes, and this bracha was manifest. Chof Shvat, actually Chof Shvat, in Tafshin and Beis, the Rebbe said a really powerful sikha, Parshas Yisro. I'd like to talk about the sikha. It was just 2 days away from the yard site, which the Rebbe does speak about at the end of the sikha. And the Rebbe says, Parshas Yisro, we have, of course, the Aseret Dibros. And the Rebbe asks, simple question, why are the Aseret Dibros written twice in the Torah? The first time in Parshas Yisro, our Parsha, and the second time in Parshas Ve'eschanan and Sefer Dvarim. And not only is it written twice, but there are several discrepancies that the Mefarshim try to explain in Parshas Ve'eschanan, why we have all these differences. The Rebbe says the most glaring difference between the Aseret Dibros in Yisro versus Ve'eschanan is that in Parshas Yisro, the Eibishter himself said it. It was Matan Torah, Hashem was speaking. In Parshas Ve'eschanan, it was Moshe Rabbeinu. The whole Sefer Dvarim is Moshe's words. It's the last 36 days of his life before Zion Adar. He's giving the Yidden his last words in Testament, preparing them to go into Eretz Yisrael. And Moshe, in his own words, repeats the Aseret Dibros. This begs another question, the Rebbe says. Once we heard the Aseret Dibros from Hashem himself in Parshas Yisro, what could possibly be added by Moshe Rabbeinu? Why would we need to hear them repeated by Moshe if we already heard them from Hashem himself at Matan Torah? This is the Rebbe's question on Chof Shvat, Tafshin and Beis. And the Rebbe answers as follows, and I would like to connect this to the Rebbitzin. The Rebbe says that within Torah, there are two dimensions. On the one hand, Torah is the holiest of holy. It's Chachmas Shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu. It's Chemda Genuza Shegenuza Lecha. It's a hidden treasure of Hashem. It's Hashem's innermost thoughts and innermost desires. It's completely above and beyond this world. It existed before the world was created. And yet, as high and lofty as the Torah is, and so separate from this world, on the other hand, Hashem took this Torah and he brought it down, took it into all the levels and contractions until it came in this world and it's nishlavish and dvarim gashmiyim. It becomes applicable to physical life, to physical objects, to human beings who are souls in bodies. to be applied in this physical world. Two completely different levels. And because of these two dimensions, on the one hand being so lofty and high and a secret of Hashem, on the other hand coming into this world and relating to physical life, this also translates into two seemingly conflicting attitudes when we learn Torah. On the one hand, it's Hashem's Chachma and Ratzon, total bittul. A person needs to be awed and tremble. When they learn Torah, they are learning the divine wisdom. This is Atzmos, this is so holy. Torah and Hashem are one. Ta'an l'shayni imersecha, the Rebbe brings. On the one hand, so absolute bittul, I want to connect to Hashem, and therefore I need to make a bracha before I learn the Torah. Remember, this is Hashem's wisdom. But on the other hand, I need to take my own mind, my human intellect, and it's my job to try to understand and grasp it and apply it. And Torah lo b'shamayim hi. Torah is not in the heavens. It's down here in this world. And the Rabbanim and Chazal paskin Torah according to their human intellect, their human understanding, and that's the psak halacha. And it relates to every single facet of physical life. So we have these two conflicting components within Torah. On the one hand, again, it's so holy and above this world, but then it comes into the physical world. On the one hand, we need to be overawed and have bittul, and yet we're supposed to use our own mind and invest ourselves with our own human being. Furthermore, the Rebbe says these two dimensions actually also are paralleled in the purpose of Torah, which is to make a dira b'tachtainim. On the one hand, we are bringing down its dira lo yisparich, and this is what Esther was speaking about as well so beautifully. We're drawing down a lakus, atzmos, but yet, where does Hashem want this dira, this home? B'tachtainim, in the physical realm, in the lowest realm. Rebbe brings, of course, the teaching, Azaz the Krasa Halach B'nai Musi, when a person comes to a certain town and wants to build a home, they need to first learn the customs. They need to study the zoning laws. And only then, when they learn the customs, can they go ahead and build a house that will become a home and be a resident in that particular town. The Rebbe says Hashem wants a dir b'tachtayna, means here in the physical world, that means we can't ignore the laws of Olam Hazeh, but yet within Olam Hazeh, according to the laws and customs of this world, we are drawing down Hashem, we're bringing in Torah and Halacha b'chol derechecha de'ehu. But how? How are we meant to actually balance such opposing energies, such opposite feelings? On the one hand, it's so holy and lofty, it's beyond me, I need to be batal. On the other hand, it's my seichel that I need to understand and invest and apply to physical matter. I need to draw godliness, but into the lowest and most physical realm. The Rebbe says this is why we have the two sets of Aser Sedivros. From the first set that we heard from the Eibishter himself, from Hashem we derive the kayach to have this awareness, this bittul, that when we learn Torah, it's Hashem speaking, Anochi Hashem Elokecha, it's Atzmus. And that gives us the ability every single day when we learn to connect to that energy, to that transcendence, to that awesome Kedusha, the divine Chachma and Ratzon that I'm connecting to, Bittul, because we heard it from Hashem himself. But on the other hand, the fact that we heard it from Moshe Rabbeinu, who's an Ish Elokim, right? A godly man, as Atmas Mahos, Lobash Begof, that enables us, that gives us the tools to bring the Kayach, to bring the Kedusha into the physical world, into the human experience, coming through Moshe Rabbeinu specifically. Why do we need both? Right? We know each one has a milah. Hearing it from Hashem himself was awesome. That's the full R, not filtered, uncompromised, emes in all its glory. But yet, we couldn't handle it. Parcha nishmasam, our souls flew away. We couldn't handle it. It was overwhelming. It was too much for the kalim. So the milah of the first is that it's the full R. But the chisaron is we didn't know how to translate that and absorb it into our physical existence. Hearing it from Moshe Rabbeinu, on the other hand, it was more filtered, it was contracted, and the proof we were able to handle it. But that was the milah. We were able to handle it, and we were able to bring it again and incorporate it, integrate that into the physical human experience. We need both. Ultimately, some people tend to excel in one more than the other. This the Rebbe didn't say in the Sikha, but for example, if you have a shliach that feels that we have so much R, so much kedusha, so much MS, that there's no reason for me to invest my efforts and energy to make an exciting program, to put out a beautiful spread. There's no reason for me to work on the decorum, that it should be aesthetically pleasing. I have MS, I have Torah, I have a Noichi. Of course, that person is missing in the second dibros, the energy of dira b'tachtainim, of bringing it down into the physical world. On the other hand, if someone feels that they put all their energy and resources into marketing and to being trendy and with it, and they make a most incredibly gorgeous program, but the teichen is filtered down and compromised, that person put their energy into the second dibros only and forgot, perhaps, lost sight of the first Aseret Dibros, the R, the Kedusha, the Emes. So the Rebbe says the Shlemus is to bring the milas of both together. On the one hand, to take the R and not filtered, unadulterated, pure Emes in all its glory, and yet to be able to bring that into every component of the physical world, into Dir B'Tachtayim. And I was learning the Sikha, and even though the Rebbe does say that it's connected to the yard site, the Rebbe doesn't specifically take these ideas and connect them to the Rebbetzin as a person. So if I may, I couldn't help but think how much this personifies the Rebbetzin. On the one hand, the Rebbetzin was holy of holy, highest of the high, a tzaddikus like we can't even wrap our minds around. The daughter of a Rebbe, the wife of a Rebbe with Ruach HaKodesh, and someone who does ma'asim, mind blown. The Rebbe said at the end of Shiva that the Rebbetzin had a connection with her father, the Rebbe, the Frierdiker Rebbe, that even surpasses the connection between father and son. The Rebbe said, because Ish Mazriat Chila Yeledes Nekeva, she, Rebbetzin Chaim Mushka, had an even more sacred bond with her father, the Rebbe, than a father and son. The Rebbe also said at Sikha several times that when she was a girl and the Frierdiker Rebbe was looking for a Melamed for her and her sisters, for the Rebbetzin, he had a Melamed who told the Rebbe, the Frierdiker Rebbe, that his approach in teaching children is only to transmit ideas that their child mind can grasp and comprehend. And the Frierdiker Rebbe corrected this Melamed and said, that's not the way. That's not the way. Dafka tell the children stories of ma'asim, of miracles, of Mesiras Nefesh. This is the energy, the R, the Kedusha that you want to give, transmit to the children from when they're young. And the Rebbe said, you see that the Mesiras Nefesh that characterized the life of the Rebbetzin is something she absorbed already in the chinuch from when she was a child from the Frierdiker Rebbe. Mesiras Nefesh, R, Bittul. She was the one as a girl, single, that was up all night taking care of the Rebbe Rashab when the Rebbe Rashab was ill. Everyone else went to bed. Rebbe Chaim Mushka was there all night taking care. She, Rebbe Chaim Mushka, was the one at age 23 that her father, the Frierdiker Rebbe, entrusted and signed her as power of attorney, all his possessions, all his finances, to whom? His daughter, Rebbe Chaim Mushka. And that night, when the secret police charged into their home, and they were violently rushing through the house and came threateningly to the Rebbe's daughters, Rebbe Chaim Mushka, and said, which party do you belong to? Rebbe Chaim Mushka displayed the greatest strength and bittul when she said one sentence, I belong to my father's party. That's who she is, bittul. And when the Frierdiker Rebbe, his imprisonment, the decree was transferred to an exile of 3 years, before that was changed again, the Frierdiker Rebbe had one person that would be able to accompany him. He chose Rebbe Chaim Mushka to come with him, his one person. What an unbelievable connection between the Frierdiker Rebbe and Rebbe Chaim Mushka. She had this bittul to her father, the Rebbe. But even more amazing in my eyes than the bittul she had to her father, the Rebbe, is the bittul that Rebbe Chaim Mushka showed to her husband, the Rebbe, our Rebbe. This is a much greater phenomenon. Every one of the most pivotal events in Lubavitch that had the most far-reaching consequences, Rebbe Chaim Mushka, though she was so tzniistic and behind the scenes, she had a very instrumental role in making it happen. First of all, the Rebbe taking the Messias. We all know that was not something that happened easily. And Rebbe Nshei Chabad with the most incredible Mesiras Nefesh. She didn't have children, biological children. All she had was the Rebbe. That was her one person. And yet, with Mesiras Nefesh, she told her husband, the Rebbe, that if he would not take upon the Messias, then all the 30 years of her father, the Rebbe's work, would be in vain. This bittul, the Mesiras Nefesh for the Klal, understanding what a Rebbe is and what a Chassid is. In the story of Hey Tevis with the Svarim, it was her testimony that was so instrumental in the victory of Didan Natzach. And to me personally, something that really boggles my mind is after the Rebbe had a heart attack. And the greatest doctors and the greatest Chassidim were pressuring the Rebbe, who wanted to remain in 770, made his wishes clear, that it was necessary for the Rebbetzin. They told Rebbetzin Chaim Mushko that it was upon her. It was her job. She had the power to transfer the Rebbe to the hospital, and they tried convincing her that this is what the Rebbe needed to save his life. And she had one question and one question only: what is the Rebbe's ratzon? What did the Rebbe say? What does the Rebbe want? Because what the Rebbe wants is what I want. She even said, never in all our years did I do something against the ratzon of the Rebbe. That's not going to happen now. What bittul, what strength, what an understanding of who the Rebbe is, to take that upon her shoulders. There was a family in Borough Park that were descendants of the Tzemach Tzedek. And whenever they had an issue that they wanted to run by the Rebbe, they would call the Rebbetzin, and she was their intermediary to get to the Rebbe. And one time, a member of the family, a woman, was having very difficult medical challenges. And the doctors wanted to operate. And Rebbetzin Chaim Mushka was called on behalf of the family to ask the Rebbe what to do. And Rebbetzin Chaim Mushka spoke to the Rebbe. The Rebbe said not to operate. She gives over the message. And of course they listened. But the woman's health was deteriorating. And the doctors were pressuring. This is a tremendous responsibility. This is life-threatening. She must do surgery. And the family were beside themselves, so they called the Rebbetzin back. And they said to the Rebbetzin, please, Rebbetzin, ask the Rebbe one more time what to do. It looks like she really needs surgery. And the Rebbetzin said the following: By Chassidim, fragt men nicht über. By Chassidim, we don't ask again. I consider myself a Chassid. I won't ask again. She said, if the Rebbe asks me, I will tell the Rebbe about her situation. But what strength, what bittul, what understanding of who the Rebbe is. Sure enough, the Rebbe asked about her state, and the Rebbe repeated again not to do the surgery. And the doctors were pressuring, and they wanted her to sign a document absolving them of liability, responsibility. The Rebbe said not to find a doctor that would give medicine that would be her cure. Baruch Hashem, they found a doctor that gave medicine, and miraculously she had a refuah shalema. And when they called the Rebbetzin to go give over the good news, the Rebbetzin tells the Rebbe, and the Rebbe said the following: we must go to doctors. It's true. Aber folgen darf man folgen da. We need to go to doctors, yes. But folgen, where is our bittul? Where do we recognize is the source of emes, of the Eibishter's ratzon? That's by the Rebbeim. And the Rebbetzin personify this in the most absolute way. The holy of the holy. She had the Dira La Yisparach. She had the bittul of the first Aseret Adibras. But together with that, Rebbetzin Chaim Mushka exemplifies Dira B'Tachtayim. She was so down to earth. She was a worldly person. Rebbetzin Chaim Mushka was intellectually brilliant on the widest range of subjects. When someone visited the Rebbe and the Rebbetzin in their home in Paris, he described how the Rebbe was sitting and learning Torah. At that time, the Rebbe was in university, but of course, spent every moment learning. And Rebbetzin Chaim Mushka was sitting and drawing diagrams, doing the Rebbe's homework. She had a brilliant mind, dear B'Tachtayim. It was Rebbetzin Chaim Mushka, this is a fascinating, not well-known fact, that received royalties from the U.S. Army for designing a revolver as an engineer. She too was a gifted engineer. She was the one that would go through the journals and the newspapers and clip out all different pieces of news and information that she felt the Rebbe would find valuable. Dira b'tachtainu. The Rebbetzin was able to relate to any person where they were at. That greatest older Hasidim, Bachrim, elder women, young women from all backgrounds, children. She would find out what are their hobbies, what are their interests, and talk to them where they were at. Dira b'tachtainu. The Rebbe spoke about by Hey Tavis, how Rebbe Nshei Chabad managed to so impress even the non-Jewish judge that the verdict in a non-Jewish court recognized what is a Rebbe? Dira b'tachtainu, literally. Whoever was Zeicha to be hosted by the Rebbe and described the most beautiful spread. She served like royalty. The Gashmias, beautifully. Dira b'tachtainu. The Rebbetzin was so elegant and fashionable in her clothing. When Rebbetzin Chaya Mushka got married, she had several gowns that she wore throughout the night, but not one of them was white. Her father, the Frierdiker Rebbe, had told her that wearing a white gown, this was a private thing in Beis, wearing a white gown is a custom of the non-Jews, and therefore, Rebbetzin Chaya Mushka did not wear a white gown. As fashionable and as down to earth, as much as she excelled in b'tachtanim, she never lost sight that it's dira la yisparech, that it's the aura of the Eibishter, it's kedusha, it's atzmos that we connect to, and that's the light that she was able to fuse and bring all the way down into tachtanim. So Rebbe Nshei Mushka really personifies, exemplifies the fusion of the highest of the high, of El Yonim, of the light, the aura, the atzmos, the emes, that's unfiltered, uncompromised from the first dibros that we heard from the Eibishter himself, but yet she draws it down and fuses it seamlessly. Dira b'tachtainu. Perhaps this can also explain the connection to the Hayyanyim of Chof Shevat. Everyone always makes a big deal about Chof Shvat, and of course it's a big deal. It's all about women, the mitzvahs on Chof Aleph. Chof Shvat, which is actually the day of Rebbe Nshei Mushka's yard site, the Hayyanyim doesn't seem to have an obvious connection to the Rebbetzin. Hayyanyim is about what's the difference between all other types of knowledge and Torah. Torah is emes. Emes means it remains true in all times and all places, the quality of emes. And I think this is so appropriate, so connected to Rebbe Nshei Mushka. This is from the Hus, it's emes. How do you know something is emes? When it remains true in every situation, when the highest values, the highest standards, the highest emes is expressed all the way in the lowest, furthest details, in the toes. The emes is expressed in every last physical detail. Like the Alter Rebbe says at the end of Yud Gimel Tanya, that's emes, going from the highest point to the other end. Emes. How do you know you have emes? When it's Aleph through Mem to Tov. That's emes, the Rebbetzin. It's Aleph through Mem to Tov, emes. Her inyan was from the highest of the high, this bittul, this Mesiras Nefesh, connected to the source, and yet she drew this down all the way into every detail, the Gashmias, in the human intellect, in the human mind, in the physical realm. Sarah Imenu, in Parshas Chayesara, we learn when she passes away, the Torah tells us she was 100 years and 20 years and 7 years. Everybody knows this, it's Rashi, it's Chazal. When she was 100, she was sinless, as pure as at 20. And at 20, she was as beautiful as a 7-year-old. So when you think about it, in the final analysis, two qualities are spoken about in her passing. That she was a tzaddikus and that she was physically beautiful. When you think about it, it's kind of strange. Of all the things to describe the Rebbetzin, Torah emphasizes her physical beauty. Is that even proper? It seems somewhat superficial. Right? Don't we all sing every Friday night? Sheker Achayim, isn't it all vain? It's all nothingness. So how come the Torah makes a big deal that Sarah Imenu was beautiful physically? And the Rebbe explains. The Rebbe speaks about how when Avram Avinu cried for Sarah. Avram was the Indian of the neshama, and Sarah Imenu is the Indian of the guf, the body. And of course, it doesn't mean a body that's devoid of soul. That means that even her guf expressed purely the light of the neshama. That for her, Ruchnius and Gashmius, there was no tension. They were aligned. Her guf, her Gashmius life, perfectly expressed the Ratzon Hashem, the Ruchnius. And this is why, literally, she was beautiful. Her panim, her face, was but a reflection of her pnimiyis, shown through. And just as the neshama is ageless, her beauty, her physical beauty, was ageless. This is the chush that women have. And again, Esther Bima spoke about this. Esther Sharfstein, I'm sorry. This is the mila, this is a special chush that women have, that we see in Rebbe Simchai Mushka and Sari Menu, that we don't need to have a conflict between the highest standards, MS, Ruchnius, and being able to draw that into the most Gashmiistic aspects of our lives. Most of our day is, in fact, in the mundane, but we excel in bringing the R, bringing the Ruchnius into that department. I saw a fascinating sikha that the Rebbe spoke in the year of Avelis in Kislev, where the Rebbe actually said that throughout the years, the Rebbitzins in Chabad had a partnership with the Rebbeim. And you don't necessarily see this in a very overt, revealed way, but while the Rebbe's, the entire shlichus of the Rebbe is to bring the R of the Eibishter into the world, the Rebbe says the Rebbitzins take that R and bring it hachutza. They excel in bringing it b'tachtainim. How amazing, right? Like Avram and Sarah, if the Rebbe is the Indian of neshama and the Rebbitzin is the Indian of the guf, she takes the R of that neshama and she facilitates and she brings it and spreads it as most of the tachtainim. It's no wonder that it's the Nashim Tzidkaniyas that are bringing Mashiach. I want to share a very personal story. After I had 4 children, I became pregnant, and after a few months, I had a difficult miscarriage. And I was going to become pregnant again, and after a few months, after some time, I was expecting, and then a few months into the pregnancy, once again, I had a difficult miscarriage. And I was davening really hard for a healthy baby. And then, even though I'd been living in LA for more than 10 years, I didn't know that LA has this incredible treasure, a tichel that has sewn into it the tichel of Rebbetzin Chaya Mushka. And it was Vahashgacha Pratis then, after all this happened, that I wanted so badly to have a healthy child, that the mikveh attendant asked me, would I like to make the bracha on tefillah using this tichel that has Rebbetzin Chaya Mushka's tichel. And of course, I was in awe, and I felt so connected, and it was so special and holy to make the bracha wearing a tichel that Rebbetzin Chaya Mushka wore. And Baruch Hashem, I became pregnant. And with time, I learned that my due date was in the week of Chof Hey Adar, Rebbetzin Chaya Mushka's birthday. And then, a month early, even though this never happened to me before, my 4 children were either on time or late, mostly late, I went into labor. And I just didn't know what was going on. Baruch Hashem, I had a healthy baby girl. We were able to leave the hospital in time. All the tests came out wonderfully. And just a couple days later, we started to hear reports about COVID-19, Corona. And very quickly, we learned that no one could go to the hospital with somebody. I would have to go alone. If my baby was born on the due date, I would have had all this anxiety and nervousness and needed to go to the hospital by myself. And I realized what a bracha within a bracha. To me, it was Rebbetzin Chaya Mushka's bracha, clearly. And not only was I blessed with a healthy baby girl, but even the timing, a month early, spared me all that unnecessary aggravation, a bracha within a bracha. And of course, we named her Musya for Rebbetzin Chaya Mushka. Being that this is Chaf Beis, the Rebbe would always say, and this was mentioned by Esther as well, the letter Chaf Beis spells Bicha when you turn it backwards. Bicha Yevarech Yisrael. That this is a day that has tremendous brachas. The Rebbe also spoke about Bicha being 22, 2 times 11 in the 11th month, which is this incredible energy that we spoke about from the first Dibrais. Atzmos, higher than this world. And yet Bicha means in you, in a pnimius, that all the brachas that anyone needs in their life, in every area, in children, healthy children, chsidische nachas, parnasa barachava, shalom bayis, shidduchim, beautiful shidduchim, everything should be fulfilled literally becha on this very, very auspicious night. The Rebbe even said at the end of Shiva that because a tzaddik's guf is holy, the Rebbetzin, who is a tzaddikes, her guf is holy, the Rebbe's words, and therefore the brachas that we have in her schos are not only ruchnistic brachas, but they're brachas pashut that come down begashmias, this whole Indian of the Rebbetzin, begashmias, becha, in an internalized physical way. And I want to conclude with this story. It was 1757, and it was the night of the Seder by the Baal Shem Tov. But instead of the usual joyous atmosphere, the Baal Shem Tov was very somber and serious. The night before Erev Pesach, the Baal Shem Tov's neshama had left his body, and it was only because of the fervent tefillas of his talmidim that his neshama returned, but he wasn't well. And it's at the Seder. And he was reading the Haggadah, but throughout the Haggadah reading, the Baal Shem Tov is breaking out into cries and sobbing. And the Talmidim were beside themselves, didn't know what to do. As the night progressed, suddenly the Baal Shem Tov started to laugh and laugh and laugh. And his holy face was alight with a joyous countenance. And he says the words, Mazel Tov, Mazel Tov, Baruch Hu, Baruch Shemai, Baruch Hashem, that your nation is made up of Yisraelics that can do more than Yisrael Baal Shem Tov. The Talmidim, of course, did not understand one word. Some distance away, in a village, there was a couple, a husband and wife Hasidim, and they had sat down to their Seder. This couple was not blessed with children. And the husband starts to read from the Haggadah. And the husband says about the troubles and the suffering in Mitzrayim. And when he read the words, and every Jewish boy was thrown into the sea, his wife burst into bitter cries. She's sobbing. And the husband gently says, why do you cry? What's wrong, my wife? And she said, if the Eibishter would bench me with a child, I would treat him so much better than he treats his own children. Said, how does the Eibishter let his children go through these suffering and gullus? What happened to the promise of the Avos? And she's crying and begging and pleading on behalf of the Yidden. And her words created a Sturm Lamayla. And there were defending angels that were on her side. And the night continued with the husband justifying the Eibishter and the wife saying, but it's not okay. The Yidden are suffering. It shouldn't be this way. Through the second case, through the third and the fourth, back and forth. And the Mila, this was creating quite the storm. Now the Baal Shem Tov tells his students, what you don't know is on Yud Gimel Nisan, Erev Pesach, I saw a Mila, there was a terrible gzeira against a village of Yidden. 400 Yiddish families were going to be wiped out in a pogrom. That year, the non-Jewish holiday came out on the first day of Pesach. The first day of Pesach was supposed to be a terrible gzeira. And the Baal Shem Tov said, I tried everything in my power. I davened, I pleaded, the highest kavanas, the secrets, nothing helped. I came to the Seder with a heavy heart. I realized I can't do any more. Now I just need to trust. And then I saw this husband and wife and the commotion that this woman with her tears and her pleading was creating Lamaila. But there were still angels on both sides, and I didn't know how this would continue until suddenly, after a night of reading the Haggadah, when they read about the Geula, this wife jumped up and started to dance, and her husband stood up and they started to dance in the joy of the Yidden being redeemed. And when this joy took place, it pierced through all the Gzeres. The decrees were broken. And that's when the Baal Shem Tov said, I started to laugh and laugh. And the Rebbe Baal Shem Tov took out his handkerchief from his pocket. And he said, everyone hold on. And they were all able to see this beautiful wife and her husband dancing still in the joy of the Geula. What she was able to accomplish, even the Baal Shem Tov could not. So I would like to say on such a special holy night, we women, like Miriam Hanaviah, we experience the Galus most deeply, most acutely. Like the Rebbe said, Miriam from Lashon Mar, the Mariris, we're in the Tachtaina, we feel the exile. We cry at Masai, even if just thinking about Sarah Dukes is enough to bring every one of our hearts to cry from the depth ad Masai. But together with the Mariris and the cry of ad Masai, we women also hold on to the highest R of emuna, and bitachon, and simcha. And we are able to handle both, the highest of the high, even in the pain. And in the schos, the Rebbe would say, "V'achai yitain el libai." In the schos of all of us, trying to take to heart the inyan of the Rebbetzin, whether it be in the inyan of the first dibrais, in the inyan of the Rebbetzins bittul to the Rebbe, knowing beyond a shadow of a doubt what the Rebbe says, that's where we need to follow, not to make our own human calculations. Like the Rebbetzin had this bittul, so too must we. Whatever the area might be, that we make excuses and rationalizations for women going out of the house. Perhaps we could try harder. It should be only a sheitel or an asay l'charav. Whatever the area that we know the Rebbe says, but we struggle with. Let's take from the Rebbetzin. Folgen, dafren, folgen, da, bittul. Hold on to that greatest art, that emes, that's unfiltered, unadulterated, pure emes. And at the same time, draw it down, b'tachtainen, and bring it into our physical lives. And remember, when we're cooking or we're driving or we're doing laundry, this is the Eibishter's world. This is the Eibishter's brachas, the Eibishter's children that he's entrusted in us to take care of. How holy, how special we're making the dir b'tachtainen. And in the schus of all of our achlatas together, and in the schus of Rebbetzin Chaya Mushka, who takes the R of the first dibros and combines it with the second, Dira lo yisparach, b'tachtainen, may we be zeicha to have the Rebbe and the Rebbetzin with us, neshama begufim, dal amatam yasar tfachim, and together we will have the geula hamitis hashlema, when this whole world will be revealed as a garden of Hashem, and it will be a true Dira b'tachtainen. L'chaim.
L'chaim. Wow, thank you, Mrs. Shachat. Your words have been truly uplifting, and I'm assuming, along with everybody else here, thank you for inspiring us in such an amazing way. We will hopefully take everything you said and carry it with us from Chof B'Shvat onwards till the Geula, with the Simcha and the Dir B'Tachtanim. Wow, thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay. Wow, this evening has been really a powerful inspiration. We're going to call again upon Davina to continue giving us, sharing her talent with us all as she sings another niggun for us. Davina, thank you.
Thank you. Ayayam, ayayam, ayinanayam, ayayam, ayayam, ayayam. Ayayam, ayayam, ayinanayam, ayayam, 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 mamamamay, tirirayayay, tirirananam. Hey, tiriranam, ay, tirirananam. Ay, tirirara, my tirirada, tirirara, mamaya, maya, my tirirada, my tirirada, hey, tirirada, my tirirana, ay, tirirana, my tirirana, tirirana, mamay, tirirada. Ayayam, ayayam, ayananayam, ayayam, 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 ayananayam, ayayam, ayayam, ayayayayam, ay, diriranam, ay, diriranam, hey, diriranam, ay, diriranam. Ay, tirirana, my tirinanda, indirinana, mamaya, da my tirirana, my tirinana, ay, tirirana, my tirinana. Hi, tirirana, my tirinana, indirinana, ay, tirirada. Ayayam, ayayam, ayananayam, ayayam, 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 ayananayam, ayayam, ayayam, ayayayayam, ay, tiriranam, ay, tiriranam. Hey, diriranam, ay diriranam. Hey, diriranam, ay dirirananay, dirinanay, yay, yay, diriraram.
Wow, thank you, Davina. You have a gorgeous voice. Thank you for sharing with us your talent. So beautiful. Thank you. Okay, continuing on with the evening, we know how dear to the Rebbitzins' heart the shluchos were, often expressing her admiration for their Mesiras Nefesh, to actualize the Rebbe's dream of being Meifetz the Mayonis in every corner of the globe. It is a singular honor and pleasure to introduce to you Mrs. Goldie Grossbaum of Northern California. Goldie will share with us her experiences on Shlichus and how she brings the Rebbe's dream to fruition in her part of the world. Goldie was born and raised in Crown Heights and moved on Shlichus 13 years ago. Together with her husband, she runs Chabad of Folsom and El Dorado Hills in Northern California whilst raising their 10 children, B'li Ayin Hara. Together, they run the Hebrew school, organize holiday events, and teach classes for Yidden of all ages. Goldie is known for her honest and real-life writing about the joys of raising a large family. Some of her writings have been featured in the Nshei Chabad newsletter. In addition, Goldie recently completed the Mikvah.org Kala Teacher training course and is also now a certified Kala teacher. Goldie is passionate about shluchus and family. Let's give over the mic to Goldie. We want to hear more from you. We will be hearing more from you about shluchus. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I want to just dedicate this portion of the farbrengen for a complete refuah shlema to Rivka Mendel Bas Esther. Thank you for that introduction. My husband and I moved on shlichus to Folsom, California 13 years ago. Here we are raising our family. We were on Chabad of Folsom and El Dorado Hills, raising our children, and recently 3 chickens also. That's a different story. I know many people can't really focus and concentrate until they figure out, so who's the speaker, what's her maiden name, who's her mother, so I'll help you out so that you can then listen to the rest of the message. My maiden name is Tenenbaum. I'm from Crown Heights. My mother's maiden name is Edelman. I hope that covers everything. I do have sisters. They say we look alike. If you don't know your geography of California very well, or you're like me growing up in Crown Heights and you assume that LA takes up majority of California, well, this is something I learned when I moved out here, that California is very big. And when you think someone's in California, you think, okay, good for them, nice weather. You don't feel too bad for them. So we're 6 hours from LA, 2 hours from San Francisco, kosher restaurants, these things are far. We're in a little pocket of Gashmias, beautiful, Ruchnias, not much. Folsom is a very secular suburban city. People here are busy chasing the American dream. You know, the typical family has 2 kids, 2 dogs, they have an RV, they have a boat, and they're constantly on the move for the next thing. And Yiddishkeit is pretty low on the radar. We didn't move here because we got a call from someone in the community saying that they needed someone. No, there was no need. The people here don't know there's a need. And our shlichus is to fill a need that people don't even know that they have. So on the one hand, there's no competing temple of any sort. We are the only Jewish presence in town. On the other hand, that's because it's really not on people's priority list. And that's our task with our shlichus. A question that I get often when I'm in Crown Heights or at a kinnis or whatever it is, people like to ask the question, so where do you see the Rebbe in your shlichus? And you can see that look in their eye. They're waiting for a really good story. You know, $1 million showed up at your doorstep. Someone called you and said they're donating a couple acres. You know, bills that were paid off, a will that was left to you that you didn't even know about. These are amazing stories. I personally love hearing them. At this moment, I don't have any to share. But there are many stories and many times where I see the Rebbe in my shlichus. And truthfully, where do I see the Rebbe? Wherever I choose. And wherever I choose is everywhere. It doesn't matter if it's an up or a down or if it's just a nothing. It's a plain day doing our thing, raising a family, being busy with kids in Folsom, California, a place that has never seen from Chabad or any type of religious kids until we moved out here. So seeing the Rebbe is not dependent on what happens around us, but I do admit that sometimes it is easier. Sometimes I don't have to think much, and it's, wow, I feel the Rebbe here right now. I know this is a miracle. And sometimes not as easy. One incident that stands out where really didn't take much effort for us to feel the Rebbe guiding us along was about 8 years ago. We were living in a house that the owner let us know that he wanted to sell. He gave us a 30-day notice, and we did not want to buy the house because we had already outgrown it. And so we set about looking for a place. We were a bit pressed for time. He gave us 30 days. I was entering my 9th month, and we really had to get things under control. A month went by. We couldn't find a place. We weren't going to go somewhere smaller because we already outgrew. We needed more space. And at the same time, we wanted to be a mile and a half at most from the Chabad house because the summers could be somewhere around 110, 115 degrees. So we had to keep it within a mile and a half at most. And one Friday, after the owner of the house had given us an extension, another 30 days, and then we had to be out, I was looking around online, doing my daily chore of looking for houses, and I saw a house that looked to be the right size, seemed to be within the right area. And so I quickly texted my husband, "We've got to check this out." It was a long Friday in the summer. He messaged the owner of the house, arranged a time to go, and he went to see it. And my husband texted right away, "This is it. This is great. The neighborhood is good. It's close enough. Everything was perfect." There was only one problem, and that was that the rent would be $500 more than what we were paying at that time. And as much as we needed the house, we also had to think, is this a responsible decision to make? We're jumping $500 a month when already we were tight, and we didn't know realistically where that money would come from. And so my husband came back home. We wrote a letter to the Rebbe and put in the Igris, and Shabbos started. Over Shabbos, we discussed it back and forth and really not sure what to do, hoping the Rebbe would give us an answer. Well, Sunday morning, my husband was giving a JLI class. It was running during the time of Hebrew school. We had this idea of not just doing it at evening class, we'll do a Sunday morning class so that parents of Hebrew school students can come to the class. Well, ironically, no parents came to the class. And my husband showed up anyway, because you show up even if you don't expect anyone. And after about 15 minutes, someone walked in. It was a woman we'd never met in person. She'd been corresponding on email for a while, but on Shluchos, you don't know if people are real till they show up. You kind of just don't believe it if they exist or not. And this woman showed up and she joined this class. And so because it was more informal, there was only her and my husband, they also were talking about general things we were doing. And the woman asked my husband, "So how's your family? How are things with your wife? She's due soon. How is everyone?" And so my husband told her about this little predicament we were in, that here we have this house that seems right, but we don't know if it's right to jump on this much more money without having a plan. And we're just not sure now, but we know that we need to move. And we're just hoping it's going to work out soon. And they continued the conversation. The class was over and they both walked to their cars together. And as my husband was about to get into the car, the woman said, "You know what? Give me a second." She went into her car and she was busy with her papers and stuff. And she comes back out with a check. And she says, "What was the amount you said it's more for per month?" She did the calculation, times it by 12, and said, "Here, this is for the difference in price for the first year. You have to live properly. Your family needs a house that's big enough for you." You can imagine there wasn't much doubt right then. We felt the Rebbe right there. This didn't make any sense. The woman, turns out she wasn't even Jewish. It was the first time she ever came to something. And here the Rebbe hand delivered our answer to us. I'll never forget. I was in the middle of teaching Hebrew school, and my husband casually walks in and puts a check down in front of me. And I just froze. What is that? And Baruch Hashem, we got our answer. We moved. It was the right place for us. And this was really not very difficult, seeing the Rebbe in our shluchos. The Rebbe guides us and gives us answers. Sometimes things aren't so smooth. A couple years ago, we had one of the girls in our Hebrew school turned 11, and the mother was very excited to plan her bat mitzvah. Now, of all the bat mitzvahs we've done so far, sometimes it's kind of just a chore that the family knows they have to do and do the bat mitzvah and get it over with. And once in a while, there's a mother who's actually excited about it and really wants to be involved. And this was that time. This mother, she had gotten involved, volunteering for many things. She was passionate about it. And when we sat down to talk about bat mitzvah, and she herself had been raised Reform, and so I explained to her there wouldn't be any Torah reading. I explained to her what our focus is on Jewish pride, the powers of the Jewish woman, knowing the heritage of our matriarchs. And she was really taken by it. And she said she needs to think about it because it's socially, it'll be a big deal to tell her parents that her daughter is not going to be called up to the Torah. And she had to think if she could really do this. And she came back a week later and said, yes, I'm in. This is just so beautiful. This sounds like what a bat mitzvah is supposed to be. And you can imagine how empowering it was for myself to finally be working with someone who was excited, who felt the passion. And this woman decided she wants to do a challah bake. And her daughter was really excited about it. Her daughter, in the summer before that, had been in our Gan Izzy, and she was going to Girl Scouts camp right after. And she sent us a note saying that when I go to Girl Scout camp, I'm not eating any pork, which that was a huge deal for them. So as we're sitting and we're discussing the bat mitzvah, we're having our meeting and the challah bake, and the mother's really enthusiastic, and so am I. And I say, so let's talk about the crowd. We have to figure out if you could do it here at the Chabad house. Maybe it's too small. Where should we do it? And she says, well, it's not going to be such a big crowd. And truthfully, there's not going to be very many Jewish people at the bat mitzvah. I said, oh, really? And I knew her husband wasn't Jewish. This I knew already. I said, what about your family? And she said, well, my family, it's really just me and my sister and my mother, because my mother converted to Judaism when she was in college. And you can imagine my heart kind of stopped at that moment, because my mind started racing, very clear what that means. Very slim chance. I wanted to hold on to that chance, but it was very slim that her mother converted according to halacha in the 70s in her college. And so trying to just keep a straight face and not show any emotion, we continued the meeting. And as soon as she left, I called my husband and I said, okay, are you sitting down? Well, guess what? She's not Jewish. And we were in a bind. Here we have this close friend, close relationship. We're planning this bat mitzvah together. And the only way out is to tell her she's not Jewish. It wouldn't be comfortable. It would destroy a relationship. It would ruin relationships in the community. But there wasn't very many options. And so my husband and I discussed and kind of tried to figure out what would be the best plan. And I had to do it soon, before our next meeting to plan this challah bake. And so with a lot of prayers and talking to the Rebbe, my husband went over to have this meeting. We were going to do it together, but we didn't have a babysitter. I stayed home and did my praying, and my husband went and did his praying. And knowing that, Rebbe, just help us handle this right. Help us. We're doing the right thing. There's no question about it of trying to work around this. Our emotions are not going to get in the way, but just let this go well, that it shouldn't have too much damage. And I waited, not breathing, for that hour while my husband was there. And he called me afterwards and I said, so how was it? And he said, well, as bad as we thought it would be. It was very difficult. The woman started crying. She was really hurt. This is her whole identity, and she's being told that she's not Jewish. And she values our friendship, and she's been volunteering at our school. And how could we do this? And my husband had to repeat over and over again how, we don't make these decisions. We value them for who they are. We're friends, but, the Torah calls the shots. And according to halacha, we couldn't do this bas mitzvah, but of course they're welcome to convert, and we would help them every step of the way if they wanted to convert properly, which unfortunately that was not what they were interested in. And as we went through and spoke back and forth and just listening to them and knowing what pain it was for them and doing the best we could with what was there, and my husband left and was with really a heavy heart that we knew we were in a situation that only the Rebbe could get us out of. There was nothing, if our emotions were involved, out of pure, love and feeling bad, we would try to kind of, beat around the bush. But with the Rebbe's kayach, we were able to work through this. And, this woman made it clear she still feels she's Jewish. They joined the Reform Temple. And at that moment, which was, it wasn't an empowering, inspirational moment. It was a moment of feeling, what are we doing? And is this the right thing? But knowing and feeling that the Rebbe is guiding us here. The same Rebbe that makes these miracles happen is holding our hand, pulling us through the situation so we could rise above our emotions and not get sidetracked by our own insecurities or our own doubts, and keep moving, because we have a mission here. The Rebbe was very clear with his mission, bringing Yidden to Torah one by one. We have to make the world ready for Mashiach, and we need to bring Yidden closer to Torah one by one. And in a town like this, you really feel the one by one. An example, feeling the Rebbe when it's just a regular day. So my husband walks to shul. We have the mile walk. That's a mile's worth of Kiddush Hashem back and forth every week. And, it's quite a sight. you have a group of half a dozen little boys in white shirts and swinging tzitzis and colorful yarmulkes, and my husband leading them to shul and back every week. Every now and then we get regards from people who see them walking, and I hold my breath to, to hear, what did they notice? Were they walking nicely? But that's not my business. Anyways, they, 1 week, a Jewish Russian guy shows up at shul at 9:30 when shul starts. There's a knock on the door, and there is this guy we've never seen before. Now, in a town like ours, that's not usual for people to just show up. Usually, if someone's interested, they'll call. They want to find out first. Usually, it's from us encouraging them till they come to shul. And here was this Jewish Russian guy who shows up, and my husband starts talking to him. How did you find us? How did you get here? And he says, well, he goes to the gym across the street every Saturday morning. And for weeks, he's been watching that the same time every morning. He sees my husband and my kids, noticeably religious. Yarmulke tzitzis, especially in the summer where, it's so hot. You see the white shirts, the tzitzis. I mean, there's no coats or anything covering it. And he says, I've been watching it. And finally, I decided to work up the courage. I wanted to find out what it was. So I came during the week and I kind of, looked around, read the signs on your door, and I want to see what goes on here every Saturday morning that you're coming here. And he joined that week for Shabbos. So it was about 3 years ago. He's been coming just about every week since then. He, after a while, bought his own tefillin and puts on tefillin every day. Last Yom Kippur was the first time he fasted, and we're talking he's in his 50s. And this Yom Kippur, he was so proud of himself. It was the first time, not only did he fast, but he also didn't drive. He moved into the hotel with us so that he can do Yom Kippur properly. And how did this start? The Rebbe guiding us on our walk to shul. My kids, my husband, just doing their regular thing of walking to shul, having no idea what impact they were having on anyone around them. And this is the Rebbe guiding us every single step. An incident that happened a couple years ago that really shifted my perspective on what we're trying to accomplish here on Shlichus. I was planning a women's concert, and I had this great idea. We had a teacher teaching our kids in Cheder that was talented and could sing and play guitar. And I had some talented women in the community, and I had this idea, let's show women the beauty of women performing for women. This is something that they've never heard of. And so I planned this event, made beautiful invitations, setting up the ambiance to be desserts, night out, very elegant. And everything was falling into place perfectly, except for one thing, the RSVPs. They weren't coming. And so as I sat there a week before the concert, going through my to-do list, sending out my text messages, my WhatsApp messages, Facebook messages, everyone is a different way to reach them, emails, and the typical, I know what was going to happen. Most of the time, I don't get responses. That's just part of how it works. You send messages, you don't hear back. And I sat there and I was in my living room with my to-do list, and everything was working, falling into place except for the people. And I looked at the picture of the Rebbe, and I remember saying out loud to the Rebbe, I said, Rebbe, I'm taking care of all the technical work. I did the invitation. I'm going to make all the food. I'm balancing this all. I want it to be a beautiful Kiddush Hashem for the women who come. But Rebbe, I can't do it myself. Please, could you send me the people? I'll do everything else. You send me the people. And I thought about it. I went to take an Igris, and I just needed to read something that would pick me up. I'm putting in all this effort. Rebbe, come on, you've got to do this for me. We're in this together, right? And I opened up. It was a short 5-line letter. And in those 5 lines were words that jumped on me that changed my whole focus. What did the Rebbe say in the letter? The Rebbe starts by saying that this week's Parsha was Parshas Balaischa. He's answering the letter writer. This week's Parsha talks about Aaron lighting the menorah. And the Rebbe continues, Razal says that Aaron lit the menorah ad shetehei shel heves eilamei aleha, until the flame would stay lit on its own. And then the Rebbe continues, short, addressing the letter writer. The Rebbe says that he, talking to the writer of the letter, should also fulfill his tafkid, because every Yid is a part of Mamlachas Kayanim V'Goy Kadesh, the kingdom of priests and holy nation. And so in his way, you need to light the soul of Yidden with whom you come in contact. And then the Rebbe says, Pam achar pam, time after time, until the flame burns on its own. And those words, Pam achar pam, just jumped off the page at me. The Rebbe was answering me. I was saying, I'm trying so hard, no one's answering. And the Rebbe was telling me, Pam achar pam. It takes time. You don't know what's happening every time you reach out to someone. You have no idea the impact of an email, of a message, just because someone's not responding or just because they're not coming. Because in my mind, I decided that this was the event that was going to, light their neshama and finally see the beauty of being a Jewish woman. It doesn't go according to my plans. My job is to light every yid's neshama, pam achar pam, and I would say pam achar pam achar pam achar pam, and many, many, many more times. But you don't know which palm it's going to be that's going to ignite the neshama so that the neshama can burn on its own. And that's what our goal is. Something, and we don't know which action, will have the impact and light the neshama. A couple weeks ago, I got a text message from a woman that I haven't heard much from over the past few years. Now, just to go back a moment, if you're wondering, the Rebbe did pull through and we had 22 women at that event and it was really beautiful, Baruch Hashem. But I learned my lesson. A couple weeks ago, I got a random text from a woman who I really did not have much to do with over the years. I didn't get the impression she was really interested in anything. The only time she ever responds to my messages is when I send out a challah bake email, she responds saying that she's gluten-free and can't come. That is the only interaction that we have pretty much. And I try text her every now and then, not usually much answer. 2 weeks ago, I get a text from her middle of the day. It said, I'm going to read it to you. Hi, how are you? Please let Rabbi know I am in the hospital with COVID. If he can say a prayer for me, I would really appreciate it. Sorry to bother you on a Sabbath. Now, this neshama, when she had COVID, she was scared. What happened to her neshama? It lit up. All those attempts, all those emails, all those interactions were building up. And suddenly, when she was worried, when she needed help, her neshama just rose right through. And she texted me to tell the rabbi. Now, I kept up with her over the past 2 weeks, texting her every other day, how are you doing? And her gratitude of just having someone checking up on her was unbelievable. She couldn't stop thanking me for, remembering her, texting her. I send her a link to say Tillim. She couldn't thank me enough. Will she become from next week? That's Hashem's department. Will she light candles this week? That's out of my league. This is Hashem's department. My department is reaching out to every yid and never giving up, never underestimating what is the impact of anything I do, big, small, something as cheap and not time consuming and takes a minute as writing a text. We never know what's the thing that's going to make the neshama click until it's a fire that's on its own. And so when I think about shluchus, I think that shluchus is not a place. Shluchus is a mindset. And the Rebbe empowered all of us to join on this mission with this mindset. And like the Rebbe writes in the letter, that every single person has the achrayus to reach out to every single yid and keep reaching out until the neshama takes off on its own, until the neshama stays lit. And we don't know what it is that's going to make it happen. And that's why we can't give up. And that's why we can't underestimate anything. So as we're gathered here on the 33rd yahrzeit of Rebbe Chaim Mashka, and it is really humbling and such an honor to be speaking to everyone. And if I could leave everyone with one message to leave you with tonight, that we can never underestimate our interactions. It's easy to get frustrated. It's easy to feel like things are useless. Maybe it's not worth my time. But remember those words, pam achar pam achar pam, over and over again, because we don't know what it's going to be that's going to make any particular neshama light and stay lit. And the Rebbe was very clear in telling us that that's our mission. We have a mission to light every neshama, bring every yid closer to Torah mitzvahs. This is going to bring Mashiach, and we have the Rebbe's kayach to do this. So together we will do this, and we'll be zeichet to Mashiach coming. Thank you.
Amen. Amen. Thank you, Goldie. That was so inspiring. Thank you for sharing all your experiences and those amazing stories and how you just truck through. I give you a bracha on behalf of everyone. You should have such tremendous hatzlacha on your shlichus in this forsaken place in the world. You should have hatzlacha bringing Hashem Shechina down there and stand with your beautiful family, which you should have tremendous nachas from, in the front lines to greet Mashiach B'Karev. Thank you so much for sharing us your words. So inspiring. Thank you. Okay. As a beautiful finale to our most inspiring program, I have to say I'm personally extremely inspired. It gives me great pleasure to introduce Mrs. Razy Greenwald from Rechavat, Israel. Razy had the enormous zechus to live in the neighborhood growing up of Kansi Vashem Asabracha, the Rebbe's Shechina. In addition, Razy had the unique privilege and zchus to have a close family connection with the Rebbetzin. In the Maimer of L'Chadaidi, there is a quote from Chazal that says, Gedayla shimusha yaiser milimuda. Serving or having a close connection with a tzaddik or tzaddikis is greater than even learning. It is an honor to invite Razy Greenwald Nee Bistritsky to share with us some treasures and stories that she has experienced with the Rebbetzin. Razy.
Night with you ladies. When I was called and asked to share about my family stories with the Rebbetzin, I said yes right away, not because we're special, but because of lack of possibly having enough time for the Rebbetzin to connect personally to each family. So I feel that our stories are your stories, and I want to share some of them so that you too can feel the greatness of the Rebbetzin. To get to the why, my family, I must go back in years and share some amazing history. Our great paternal grandfather, Reb Levi Lagavir, was a chassid of the Rebbe Rashab. The Friedrich Rebbe said in a Sikha in Tafshin Dalid that the Rebbe Rashab wore his shrine only in Lubavitch and only on special occasions, and quote unquote, when we need the light of Lubavitch. The Rebbe continued that at one such time, the Rebbe Rashab wore it to be Masada Kedushin in Moscow by the wedding of Levi and Ruchama Lagavir in Tafresh Nun Zayin. My grandmother was born to them shortly late, around the same time as Rebbetzin Chaim Mushka, and their families would spend summers together that created a lifelong friendship. Another of their friends was Nacha Heber Rifkin. The group remained lifelong friends, besides when being separated because of war. World War II was happening. My grandfather knew that they had to leave Europe, and he was a very wealthy businessman, so he bought tickets on the Queen Mary, and he also bought tickets for his in-laws, Reb Levi and Ruchama Lagavir, that were in Belgium, to sail on the Serra Pinta from Portugal. They never made it to the ship. Last that they heard from Reb Leivik and Ruchama were that they were in a camp in Darcy, France, which was an internment camp for the Nazis. And after my grandmother passed away, years later, my father did a research and found that they had been sent by the Nazis to Auschwitz on the train, and where they perished on the way. Hashem Yikom Damam. Meanwhile, the Rebbe and the Rebbetzin were supposed to sail on a ship, and they received a telegram from the Rebbe Rayatz not to board that ship. That ship was bombed and sunk. The Rebbe and Rebbetzin were in danger while searching for new tickets. My grandfather, Mordechai Bistritsky, heard that the Rebbe Rayatz was diligently looking for tickets, and he approached him and he offered to change the names on the tickets to the Rebbe and Rebbetzins names because his in-laws hadn't arrived at the port. The Rebbe Rayatz accepted, and so was done. The Rebbe and Rebbetzin sailed on the Sarah Pinta instead of the chassid of the Rebbe Rashab's that he wore the triangle to his wedding to bring the light of Lubavitch. When the Rebbe and Rebbetzin arrived in New York, my father called to wish the Rebbe Shalom Aleichem. That started a close relationship until the Nesias and continued in a new way forever. My father learned in 770. Although his father was a Biana Chassid, he had a connection to the Frierdiker Rebbe, and his father allowed him to learn there because it was the best yeshiva. When the Rebbe and the Rebbetzin settled in New York, they would travel every Sunday by subway to the west side of Manhattan to visit my grandparents, and it was a sign of their friendship continuing, as well as Hakaras Hatov for the tickets that they gave. Our family was zocha to many kiruvim over the years from the Beis Rebbe, but it was always kept quiet, never discussed with anyone. After the Nesias, my father became very close to the Rebbetzin, and he would visit her often, especially on Friday nights on the way home from shul. His visits were always discussions about the family, and whatever they spoke about, my father never repeated unless relevant to do so. Even after his talkus, my father felt he didn't have permission from the Rebbetzin to say what he was told or what he saw. In my father's later years here in Eretz Yisrael, I asked him permission to be able to share when asked, and was given so. My oldest brother, Levi, Olav Shalom, got married in Israel. Before leaving to the wedding, my father went to the Rebbetzin for a bracha, and he asked the Rebbetzin if she would give him something of the Rebbe's for the chuppah. The Rebbetzin told him to wait, and she went upstairs and she brought down a few of the tichels from the previous Rebbeim that they used during Hakafas, Tikkios. The Rebbetzin gave them to my father, but she asked him to return them and not to let them be given to anybody. My father kept them in his pocket throughout his time in Israel, and as soon as he got back, he didn't even go in the house. He went straight to the Rebbetzin to return the tichels. When he came to the Rebbetzin, she took them and she went upstairs and she came back with a silk scarf. She told my father that this scarf was her father, the Rebbe Rayatz's, and she's giving it to my father as a gift. The Chassanim of our family wear that scarf to their chuppah till today. My oldest sister, Miriam, had many opportunities to go to the Rebbetzin, whether it was with Shalach Manis or other things. And the Rebbetzin always would take an interest in what Miriam was doing. She knew that Miriam sewed her own clothing, and she would ask her what type of fabric she's using now, where she gets her patterns, and what inspires her to make the clothing that she's making. When Miriam became a Kala, my father had to send a package to the Rebbetzin, and he asked the chassan to bring it. Afterwards, the Rebbetzin called my father and told him that the chassan is a prince of a man. As far back as I can remember the Rebbetzin, she was a figure for me of malchus, softness, and just royalty. Several times over the years, the phone would ring in our home, and if I was zocha at that specific time to answer, the Rebbetzin, and I heard her voice on the phone, and when asked who it was, she would say, Mrs. Schneerson from President Street. We immediately got very excited and passed the phone to my father. My parents brought Mishloach Manos every year to the Rebbetzin, and it was special. Every year, my mother made a beautiful cake. In the early years, it was a cake decorated with cream and marzipan flowers. And additionally, she made challahs, and my father would bring a bottle of vodka and a box of the special chocolate that the Rebbe liked, the noblesse chocolate with the horse on it. Every year, another child was zeicha to go with my father to bring the shalchmanis. And when I was about 7 years old, it was my turn. I can feel the excitement now. When we came to the house, we went at the prearranged time, and we went to the back door, and my father knocked. The bachur who was taking care of the house, opened the door, and the Rebbetzin greeted us in the dining room. She motioned to my father to put the things on the table, which was set beautifully, a white tablecloth and beautiful flowers. And then she told us to sit on these couches, and she started speaking to my father in Yiddish. I was a little girl and I didn't understand Yiddish. And I was looking around, I was enthralled. I was in the Rebbe's house. I soaked everything in, and then my eyes hit the cake. And the Rebbetzin noticed that I was looking at something, and she said, "Beis, what do you have to say?" And I said, "Rebbetzin, aren't you going to cut the cake and give us a piece?" Wow, with all her royalty, she stood up. Of course, how could I not give my guests something to eat? And she went to the kitchen, she cut the cake, and she brought us a piece. My father was aghast. He was so upset. But his main thing was that he really wanted the Rebbe to see the Shalach Manis complete. I didn't get to go for a few years until I was a young lady. Those cakes evolved. And as the Rebbe started the Miftzai, my mother started making the cakes with the theme of the year. Whatever the Rebbe's directive was, she started asking my brothers and my father after every farbrengen from Tishrei already, what's the Rebbe's talking about? What's the Rebbe's directive? And she built her cakes around whatever it was that was happening that year, whether it was Miftzat Tefillin, Miftzat Neshek, the Miftzayim tanks. Every year there was another beautiful cake. After Purim, the Rebbetzin would return the tray to my parents. On the day of my wedding, my father took me to the Rebbetzin for bracha before we went to the wedding. After the chuppah, which was Erev Rosh Chodesh Tammuz, we had our Cheder Yichud in 770 in the back in the library, in the small library. And while we were in Cheder Yichud, the Rebbe returned from the aisle. Now, nobody knew that the Rebbe was coming back. And in those days, the photographer didn't hang around 770 to take pictures of the Chassan and Kala. But when the Rebbe came into 770 and walked straight to the sink where his custom was to wash his hands, my brothers knocked on the door and quickly told me, "Raisi, the Rebbe's here." We opened the door and the Rebbe was standing there and he gave us a bracha. Our parents weren't even there. When we got back to the hall, they were so excited to hear what we were zeicha to get. And it was very special. A little more than a year later, we were sent on shlichus to Petropolis, Brazil. We already had a little boy, and my father would tell us that the Rebbetzin asked about how we were doing on the shlichus. When we came back for a visit about a year later, we were zeicha to Yechidus and a visit to the Rebbetzin with my father. Of course, it was prearranged, and the table was set beautifully for us. There were chocolate coins for Ari. I was so nervous that he would make everything dirty, and the Rebbetzin calmed me down, and she said, "Let him be, everything is washable." My younger brother, Shloimi, who is today a shliach in California, was learning in Taras Emes as a bacher in Yerushalayim, the year of Dida Natzach. When the Bachram heard that the Sfarim were being returned on Friday, they wanted to be there. So Shloimi and some of his friends just left without asking Hanhala or parents. When he showed up at home by surprise, my father was really upset and he didn't talk to him. On Friday night, as was his custom, my father would go to visit the Rebbetzin and discuss the family. And the Rebbetzin, he told the Rebbetzin how upset he was with Shloimi. The Rebbetzin told my father that he shouldn't be upset. He should be proud. Other boys his age are excited about things that aren't good, but your son is excited for the Rebbe. You should be proud. Naturally, when my father came home, he gave Shloimi a big hug, and that created between them a beautiful relationship that lasted for many years. Every story, and there are so many more, it has a lesson for us. The Rebbe and the Rebbetzin showed us the way, and we need to follow. One more thing to show how special the Rebbetzin was when she would come to visit her mother in 770, she would go to the side door and go down to the basement to take the elevator up. She wouldn't go in the front door. She didn't want to bother the Bachrim that were sitting in the Zal learning. That was our Rebbetzin. V'kitzu ranenu shochne afar v'hi b'socham l'chaim v'levracha.
Amen. Amen. Thank you so much for sharing your beautiful experiences, so rare and unique with all of us here, that we can learn from them. Thank you, Mrs. Greenwald. And it's, thank you for talking all the way from Eretz Yisrael, and sharing with us your stories and inspiration. Okay, dear friends, this concludes our presentations this evening. We have been honored and privileged to have such esteemed speakers and singer. Thank you. But before we go, let us take to heart and many of the speakers mentioned, what the Rebbe always encouraged, that whether we organize or attend an event, it should be a pa'ula nimshachas, an ongoing action. Hopefully, all of us will have been inspired by a vartir, a story, a nugget of wisdom, or an insight, and we will internalize it and take it with us. This should lead to a hachlata taiva in any area of Avodah, which will make this event tonight, one which will last long after this program has concluded. An evening such as this is a combined effort of many people, and on behalf of all of us here, I would like to thank tonight's organizers, in particular, Mrs. Spritzer, Mrs. Light, and all the other many people that put in hard work to pulling this event together, the technical aspects, the advertisement, all the different sides to it, and of course, bringing together our beautiful program. As we say in davening every Shabbos morning, "B'chol mi sha'iskim b'tzarchei tzibur be'amuna yeshalach bracha b'atzalacha b'chol ma'aseh yadehem." May Hashem bench all those who organize this event with all brachas, b'gashmias of ruchnias, b'seich klal Yisrael. I just want to conclude by thanking everyone here who participated this evening. May our next Pu'ala of Nshei Chabad be in the Ezras Nashim of the Beis HaMikdash HaShlishi, with the Malcheinu Bareshenu, with the Rebbe at our head, with the Rebbetzin, with the coming of Mashiach now. Tekef Umiyad Mamish. Thank you for joining, and have a wonderful, inspiring 24 hours of Chof Beis Shevat. Thank you. I just want to add, Davina will kindly be continuing her singing and her musical talent with everyone. So if you'd like to stay on, you take the opportunity to hear some really beautiful talent. Thank you, Davina. Good night and sei gesund. Kol tov. Thank you, Davina. And we'll sing along from your places. Thank you. Sorry.
No, it's okay. Thank you for having me.
Of course.
Hine matavu manayim shevesachim gam yachad. Hine matavu manayim shevesachim gam yachad. Hine matav shevesachim gam yachad. Hine matav shevesachim gam yachad. Hine matav umanayim shevesachim gam yachad. Hine matav umanayim shevesachim gam yachad. Hine matav shevesachim gam yachad. Hine matav shevesachim gam yachad. Hine matav umanayim shevetachim gam yachad. Hine matav umanayim שבת אחים גם יחד, דידי-דן-דן-דידי-דננאי, היי דידי-דננננאי, הנה מה טוב, הנה מה טוב, נננאי דידי-דה-דה-דה-דם, הנה מה טוב ומה נעים, שבת אחים גם יחד, הנה מה טוב ומה נעים, שבת אחים גם יחד, הנה מה טוב, הנה מה טוב, דידי-די, דידי-דה-נה-נה-נה-ניי, הנה מה טוב, הנה מה טוב, דידי-די, דידי-דה-דה-דה-דה-די.
Thank you. Yeah. People unmute it. Now people can join. Davina, Davina, you want to sing your Moshiach song that you sang in California? You know that special, beautiful song?
If just,
Yeah.
I just want to know if people can mute themselves just because.
Okay, go be with me.
Thank you.
Very hard. Okay, you can sing your song and afterwards something lebedik or yechi, something more lebedik.
Okay. Light of kingdom firmly promised to David forever. Ay na 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 ma ay 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 ay